And I also want to thank Kurt Rochley, who made this connection for us. Thank you so much. I am Ricky Lowitz. I'm the CEO of Working Credit, or co-CEO of Working Credit. I have another wonderful, there's a co-CEO who just joined us from Credit Builders Alliance, Sarah Shenben. But also on the line today is Kristen Schell. She is our Chief Program Officer, from whom I learned everything I know about credit. If you have any questions during the session, you can direct them to Kristen through the chat. Kristen, could they also, or should they also use Q&A, or just do chat you directly?
We could use the chat. That would be
chat.
fine.
You can chat everyone, or you can just chat Kristen. But I'll get started. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, so and let me just close this up. So let me just give you a little bit of background about Working Credit NFPs. Our mission, so you know, we've defined it to this way over the last few years, and it's why we started, but this is the best statement of it. We, as a nonprofit, partner with individuals and communities, and our goal is to interrupt structural racism, and do so by providing credit building, education, counseling, and access to the products people need to thrive. You should know that as a nonprofit, and because of our choices, we don't offer financial products of our own, nor do we get fees for recommending third-party products. We focus on personal credit, but our counselors can address any financial concern, with the exception of any investment advising. We have a single program. It's all we do, and it includes this workshop, which I'm about to run for you, where we're going to attempt to explain how personal credit scoring works. And then we always, as a core part of our program, make one-on-one credit building counseling available to people after the workshop, recognizing that a workshop alone is often not enough to help someone get on their feet, especially meeting someone in the middle of their adult life. We're going to tell everything we can about the credit scoring system, but people come with their own circumstances. And if anybody needs one-on-one credit building counseling, we can accommodate that, and it's free. Thank goodness we have foundation funding for now to do that. I'll explain a little bit more at the end, because it's something you can tell your clients about, and anybody on the line can consider that. You should know that when we do provide counseling, we don't share any personal information with third parties. Just one more note about us before I get started, or two more notes about us. We started in 2014 specifically to offer credit building as an employee benefit. And then in 2020, we realized that there were just real limitations to that. We continue to offer our service as an employee benefit, but we've started to work through replicable strategic partnerships. And to be honest, the most robust first one that we ran was for small business owners. And so starting in 2020, we partnered with 8 out of 14 grantees of a multi-funder collaborative here in Chicago. It supports business support organizations who are helping people qualify for business capital. We've worked with about 206 people individually and about 700 people in workshops since that started. I'm going to share a little bit of their data before I start the workshop. We've also partnered with City Colleges of Chicago, where we're serving students there who actually, they set up a debt forgiveness program for students, but the requirement is they go through our program. And then we're part of we have other partnerships. One is a big municipal initiative in Boston, and on the right, you'll see other kinds of partners of ours. That being said, in addition to the workplace, and in addition to meeting us through strategic partners, we also have a D2C channel. And so consumers can access our service online at no cost. Our business owners have done incredibly well. And so I just want to give you this data before I start. We as an organization have 2 metrics that we have relied on from the start. We look at lots of data because we pull credit reports every 6 months. We get our participants permission to do that. We get it actually for 5 years. And if you just take a look, the first thing we watch is, are we increasing the number of participants with prime FICO scores? So in other words, we made a decision early on that that we weren't going to pat ourselves on the back if someone went from 500 to 550, because we know qualitatively there's no change. They don't experience any change in the marketplace. But if we can get them to a prime score of 660, then there are qualitative changes like access to business capital, relevant to this call, but access to better quality rental housing, to lower interest rates across the board. And of course, it opens doors to home ownership. For our small business owners, of which 206 are now in the program, after 12 months, we start at the that cohort. Looking at all of them, 32% had prime scores when we met them, and 12 months later, 43% had prime scores, so an increase of 11 percentage points. The other thing we look at is, does the small business owner, does any participant have access to available credit in an emergency? So as you know, a lot of people look at, does the person have savings? We look at, we think that's great, but we look to see if the person were to have a crisis, could they get through it without having to go to any kind of predatory lenders and pay those higher rates? And that's actually, I can see there's a problem with there may be a problem with the chart here, but it's gone from 53 to 63%, a 10 percentage point change for small business owners, and a 72 overall increased their scores. But I'm just going to go now and start this workshop. This little bit of background on our work with small business owners and on us. But we always start by saying, what is credit building? Credit building is a service probably 15 to 20 years old, not that well known, but we focus specifically on helping people establish and sustain strong credit scores. It is very different from credit repair, and more we're working on this issue because credit repair is a predatory practice violating a federal law and federal rule, and we're working a lot to curb their practices. But I'm going to show you this. This is, if you don't mind, you're my first group to look at a new way of explaining credit repair if you don't know them. It's weird that I stop and do this, but I think it's important for people to know, don't worry, we're not a credit repair group, but let me just show you what I'm talking about here. What do they promise? They promise to fix your credit by getting negative items removed from your credit report. That is their angle. And you know what? Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm going to go to a different slide only because I see that I didn't take off one piece of information from that slide. So I'm going to do this the way I usually do credit repair. This is our tried and true method. How does credit repair work? They promise to fix your credit. They charge about $100 a month. How do they operate? What they do is dispute negative items on your credit report again and again and again, whether they're accurate or not. So why are they doing that? They are inundating the credit bureaus with disputes because they're waiting for them to miss the 30-day deadline they have by law to respond, because they know something. They know that if they miss the 30 days, the item will get removed. And at that moment, when it gets removed, they call you or they actually send you, they let you know right away, we are doing a great job, the item has come off. And if the item has come off, the score goes up. What's the problem with this? If the item was accurate, it'll be back on the person's report within 2 or 3 months, but they don't tell you that. So they get people working with them over a period of years where they're sometimes getting even accurate things off their reports. If the person, and then they come back on, because it's the Fair Credit Reporting Act that allows for all of this to happen. That's the piece of legislation that says if the bureaus miss the 30-day deadline, they have to, the item has to be removed. That same piece of legislation says if a creditor sees that it's come off for that reason, they can add it right back on, and they will. The scam is pretty huge. A group called Lexington Law puts this number out on their site to the right in blue, where they say they've removed 10 million items from people's credit reports in 2017, since 2017, or in 2017. We think 9 million or more have come back on, and people don't know what's happened. And we've met people who've spent thousands. So We don't do that, but it's good for everyone to know about this. What consumers should know is you can and should dispute real inaccuracies. It should take 30 to 45 days. You may need help. And we're happy to do that for anyone for free, but the system's set up so you can dispute yourself for free at annualcreditreport.com. We can talk more about that later. Getting into credit building though, we start by asking, do you know anyone who struggled to get a car loan at a low interest rate, rent an apartment, get approved for a mortgage, and in the case here, get approved for business capital? That is most likely due to having a poor credit score or no credit score at all. So just to go over the basics, because we want to make sure we're all on the same page. What is this credit score? It's your reputation as a borrower. It's a 3-digit number that's supposed to tell lenders how likely you are to pay them back. Where does it come from, this credit score? It comes from your credit report. And then the question is, where does the credit report come from? And again, for many of you, you know this, but we start from the beginning and we're going to walk you through the system to the end, but we start in the beginning. It comes from your credit report. Where does the credit report come from? It comes from one of these 3 credit bureaus. They all produce credit reports, and you'll know their names: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So for decades, lenders trying to make a decision about whether they wanted to make a loan to someone, they would rely on the information in their credit reports. There was no score available. So a lender would purchase the report. It could be 17 pages long. They would read it through to understand whether how much risk there was, and they would make a determination. And that was time intensive and so cost intensive. So in 1989, when a company called FICO introduced the credit score, it really, it stuck and continues to stick. And this is an equation that they came up with where basically all the information on the report goes into one of many equations, but FICO 8 and FICO 9 are the scores that you're probably most familiar with. And that score now, when you get your report, is on the front page of your credit report. It made it easier for lenders. They no longer had to read credit reports. They could just look at the score and they trust it. For better or for worse, they trust that number and they actually may not look at the report anymore. So just so we also are on the same page, what's a good credit score? The range of the FICO score is 300 to 850. And, but think about it in terms of tiers. Subprime scores are the lowest, are anything between 300 and 600 is considered subprime. And at that range, a lender might either deny you a product or give you the least favorable rates and terms. And this is where you get the highest predatory rates. If someone gets to between 601 and 660, you can get reasonable rates and terms, but you have very little negotiating power, right? Because you're not prime. And so we always say to people, if you get a good rate and we tell people what we think they could get here, take it and run because you don't have negotiating power. At 660, and again, if anyone has questions, write them into the chat and Kristen will be answering in real time. At 660 and above, you probably know this, it's considered prime. You get better rates and terms. At between 780 and 850, I mean, now you can kind of, you can negotiate, you can sit back, you have a good score. Anything above 780 is considered super prime and you'll typically get the best rates and terms. Oh, hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry about that. I have no problem with my computer. I'm so sorry. Okay, FICO, you may know, is not the only score. There's also a Vantage score, and that's what Credit Karma uses. I want you to know, though, especially with your client, with the small business owners you work with, 90% of lenders use FICO. So, so it's important for the people you're working with to check their FICO scores. Today, you can get your FICO score for free at many places. One is discover.com. You don't have to buy products from them, but there's avenues now to get that score for free and see where you stand. I can tell you the Vantage score doesn't.
Ricky,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You can actually no longer get your free FICO score at discover.com. They stopped that program as of May. 2022, but I'll put in the chat some places where consumers can get their free FICO score.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. Thank you. Kristen supervises all of our counselors, and Kristen stopped me with anything. But there are places to get it, and Kristen will tell you. The reason why it's so important, and you probably all know this, but I'm showing you the workshop we just to establish this. What's the difference between like a 580 credit score and a 670 credit score if you were purchasing a used car for $10,000? With a 580, what we see all the time, we see people getting 25% interest rates. With a 670, we can see if sometimes they still will be kind of bamboozled and people try to rip them off, but we're seeing people with a 670 can get about a 5% interest rate. So this is real money, because the difference here, a person with the 580 is going to pay $105 more a month for this car, and $6,000 more over the 5 years of the loan. The reason we started working credit is that thanks to Kristen and Credit Builders Alliance, the group she was working with, and Justine Peterson is another great group, and that's actually where Kristen worked. We were able to see that you could increase your score often within 6 to 12 months, and our whole organization is set up to help people do that. It may take longer, it may take less time, but we can do it. It's a question of understanding the algorithm. The other few things I just want to mention about why credit's so important is, yes, you need good personal credit to qualify for business credit. You know that better than anyone else. But of course, 43% of landlords check your credit. You need at least a 620 to even qualify for a mortgage in the US. And then if you can actually qualify, if we have people who have a 620, we are really, and they want to buy homes, and many people buy homes through us. We're saying, wait, don't just jump in because you now qualify. If you can get your score higher, it's real money. So we're showing you here an example of two people who want to buy the same house for $175,000. And look at what happens. If Ray has a 630, this is just kind of generalizing over time. He would get about a 5.6% mortgage. Kim, if she could get to a 780, would get about 4%. The difference in the interest would be $60,000 over the 30 years. So obviously, if people can take the time, don't need to buy right away, this makes a big difference. But the real reason, I'm shifting now to like how the system works, and this is what Kurt really wanted me to talk to you about, is it's just to start out and say, like, why can we move the score so quickly? Why can anyone move their score quickly? Well, first I want to just say there's no denying that structural racism accounts for significant disparities in credit scores. But what we test every day and see is that the equation that generates the score, it does not factor in many things that I know I thought it did, including your income, savings, race, address, age, gender, education, criminal background. So we've looked at this. Kristen taught me this for years. We've watched people from very different backgrounds come into the credit system, and that equation isn't driven by those variables. It's driven by whether the person has two things. To get a good score, it's like, have they borrowed using a mainstream loan or a credit card? And then the score is about how the person managed the process of paying it back. Now, to the point of structural racism, these are the products that have been most difficult for communities of color to access. But a program like ours, we came in knowing that we could help people access these products, and with it, help them build credit. In fact, we always come in with at least one partner that we know, no matter what, they'll help people open a product, and you'll see why that's so important. But what we found is that it doesn't matter how much you borrow either. So if we were to help someone get a $300 loan and they paid it back in $25 increments over a year, it would have the same effect as $2,500 payments over the course of a year on a $30,000 loan. No difference in the effect it has on your score. Similarly, we found that if we can help people get secured credit cards, and a lot of small business owners have used this to get huge gains in their scores. They use a secured credit card, they could put $5 on it a month, pay it off, meaning they're not even, on time, not even carrying a balance. And that would maximize their score. So there's, we've seen people go up enormously by getting 2 secured credit cards, putting $5 on them a month, paying it back. They have no debt, but their score is going to go up. So let me talk about why. And I'm sorry again. This is, again, I poured a whole soda on my computer last night and it's doing some funky things. But okay, the next thing I just wanted to say is to put it out there. Do you know, we asked this question, do all adults in the United States have a FICO credit score? And I'm not sure if you know this, but the answer is no. 20% have no credit score at all. So who are they, right? They're actually often the best money managers. They're people who are living on cash. They may be great money managers, but they don't trust loans, they don't trust credit cards, and they're doing everything in cash. The problem is that having no FICO score is like having a subprime score. You'll get the worst rates and terms. Before we dive into exactly how credit, the rules of credit scoring, I'll just give you a couple of numbers here. It is possible for someone with no score to get to a 700 FICO score in 6 months. We do see that all the time. If it's also the case, I want to tell you, when we have people who start with a score, the average increase in 6 months is 42 points. And I should say that this was a small business owner on the south side of Chicago. The highest increase we've ever seen in 6 months was 190 points. And I'm happy to discuss what happened there, but it was a combination of removing student loans that were reporting incorrectly and adding a couple of credit cards. And she saw that increase. What are the 3 rules? I'm going to go through them quickly, and then I'm going to go into each one in some detail to make sure everybody's knows exactly what I mean here. So real quickly, when we started this program and we developed this curriculum, we boiled down credit scoring to 3 rules. So tell your friends, tell your adult children, tell your partner, spouses. These are the things to remember. First thing is, if you want a strong credit score, you have to open at least 1 credit card or 1 mainstream loan just to get in the game. And that would be like a student loan, a car loan, mortgage, something like that. That's the first part. The second thing you have to remember is payments on those products you have to prioritize and make on time if you can, or at least make them within 30 days of the due date. And I'll explain why that's so important in a minute. But that's the second thing, that those payments, like your credit card, you don't think I'm going to prioritize that in emergency. These products you want to prioritize, and I'll explain why in a second. And the third thing is, if you use a credit card, try to stay below 30% of the credit limit on all of your cards. Someone who does those 3 things will have a strong credit score. Let me get into more detail. So the first thing was you have to have at least 1 loan or credit card. And again, any questions on this, just write to Kristen. Why do you need at least 1 loan or credit card? You may know this, but of all the payments, all the bills we pay every month, the only payments we make that get reported religiously to the credit bureaus every month are our loan and credit card payments. So we pay a million kinds of bills, but our loan payments, our credit card payments, they're reported to the credit bureau. So what does that look like? I'm showing you here this is an old TransUnion report, just to give you a sense of what this looks like. This is a car loan, and on someone's credit report, the key here is what you see in red. So we know that it's a car loan for $16,000. It started at $16,000. Person's paid a bit off. It's $12,000. They pay $272 a month. None of that affects the score. As the key thing, or that it may have a minimal effect on the score. The real issue with the score is the information circled in red. So if you see that, what we're saying here is that this information is what they use to generate a score, and you can figure out what it is. What do you think those green checks are? Probably guess those are on-time payments over the past 12 months. A green check, though, just to be clear, it means the person that they either paid by the due date or there's a window there of 30 days. And that's like getting an A on your report card. It drives your score up. You can also see there that they know if you're late. So that 1 And all the credit reports look different, but they all have symbols for these things. One in this case means the person was 30 days late. It's called a delinquency, and it's recorded there. This is the information they use to generate a score. With your first product or getting back into the market having not had one, they won't, FICO won't actually even give you a score for 6 months because they want to watch to see what you do for that long before they'll say, yeah, I'll take the risk and put a number on this person. They want to see a pattern. Interestingly, you should know this, while it takes 6 months to generate a score, it also takes just 6 months to lose a score. So if I basically had a credit, or if I had on my report just one car loan and I finished paying that car off and nothing else is reporting this way, I have no credit cards or anything, in 6 months, I'll check my report and I'll have no score. Why? They don't have enough information. They're not going to take the risk as a company to give me a score if they have had no information coming in for 6 months. And that's really important to know. So you'll sometimes hear people say, I'm going to cut up all my credit cards. Well, you know, what can happen then is that the credit, if you don't have any debt, you cut up your credit cards, the credit card companies will probably close them. And if they do within 6 months, you'll have no score. So any questions about that, please direct them to Kristen. Oh my God, I can't believe I did this again. Please forgive me. Hold on a second. Just go back. And okay. Okay, so you saw this. All right. Now, there are products that we can help people get if they don't have any way to build credit. So, and I apologize, I see, well, what's going on here? Okay, there's something called a credit builder loan, which you may have heard about. I'm sorry about that extra D there. This is something we can do for someone who needs either additional products or needs a first product to just get on the map. We get one from Justine Peterson Inc. We actually support, it costs us a little bit money, but we have some grant dollars to do it. This is kind of an incredible opportunity where you can get and most banks have these, by the way. You can take, in this case, a $300 loan, a 12-month loan. It's 0% interest because we actually have a relationship and could use grant dollars to cover this, but you don't take the money up front. The $300 actually goes into a locked savings account, which limits the risk to the bank or the credit union. Because if you don't pay it back, they never gave you the money anyway. In fact, you don't get the $300 until you pay it off. As the person makes 12 payments of $25, they save a month, they save $300, but their payments get reported. They have like 12 green checks, and that builds credit. With this particular product that we have in our back pocket from Justine Peterson, they will shut it down if the person can't make a payment before they'll have a red one, like you saw, or a delinquency show up. That's just this particular deal we have with Justine Peterson. So there's no negative credit consequences. There's also, and again, those D's were supposed to be S's. I think this is my computer being funky. There's a company called Self Inc., and they're really incredible. Kristen, tell me if I have that, the URL right. They have a credit builder loan product. They're not 0% interest, but they're relatively low. They have actually, I think, at least over 1 million or a couple million people using loans like this to just build their credit. And it's an online company that we think is pretty terrific. Also, secured credit cards can be used for this purpose. So on the first point of, you've got to have a product, we get it, and we want to make sure we can connect people to one. Now, the second thing, and I think this is probably the most important thing I'll say today, is why do you have to make these payments your priority? Why do you have to pay those on time? In person, I would ask for answers, but I'm just going to tell you, if you are 30 days late on one of these products, meaning you get a red one, like I showed you, it will lower your score that month, typically by 100 to 125 points. So I'm showing you here from someone's credit report we worked with years ago, where he had one thing on his credit report, which was a Macy's credit card. And do you see it was for $200 limit? And if you look to the right, you'll see that he always paid it on time, always. Or within, again, you get a green check if you're 29 days late. It's only at 30 days late that you get this gets recorded. His score, you can see this, see that red one? While we were working with him, my counselor called. Someone got sick in his family. He went out of town. He didn't pay any of his bills, including this credit card bill. And that 1 month actually brought his score down from 710, which is where it was, to 597. Now, he recovered. And the thing I want to emphasize, and for your clients too, you can always recover. He recovered within about 6 months. But because there is no way to ruin your credit forever, you can always build back. But that delinquency stays on your report for 7 years, right? So a single late payment because someone was ill, 7 years is on his report. Again, the score is what's more important, and that recovers in 3 to 12 months. Now, important, we always try to pull them to just talk about this. With a credit card, you don't have to pay the balance to keep from getting a delinquency. You're only delinquent. So the balance, if you see on this guy's card, was 162 at the time. If he had paid $25 and wasn't 30 days late, that was all he needed to pay to avoid that red one. So for $25, the score dropped over 100 points. Now, what about your other bills? Because this is so important to understand. Just a second. By that, I mean, let's say your rent, your cable bills, medical bills, utilities, cell phone, right? None of those payments get reported to the credit bureaus. Now, rent is a special category, and there's a big movement to have rent payments reported. We think that's a great thing, but you can't count on them. They don't yet necessarily factor into your FICO score. So when you think about your other bills, know that if you're paying all your bills on time, you could still have no score. So these things actually those other bills will only affect your score if you don't pay them at all and the creditor gives up on you paying, which usually is after a couple of months. And because they gave up, they sell it to a collection agency. So now if they do this, right, let's say a cable bill, you're late for 3 months, believe me, the credit bureaus don't know about it. But once they sell it, if they give up on you and they sell it to a collection agency, they will report it to the credit bureaus. And it'll, excuse me, I'm sorry. It'll look like this collection account here. And I'm just moving something. This is a person who, in addition, who now sees on his report, a lot of time must have gone by, but it's a collection from ComEd. They sold it to a company called Southwest Credit Systems. And by the time they sold it, the family owed $2,218. So obviously they waited a while. Now, what does this do to your score? A collection will typically lower your score by 40 to 50 points. So it's not as bad as a delinquency, and it will stay on your report for 7 years. And what I will say is that many in our field, there are people who think, oh, the first thing you want to do is address collections. And we would say it's not necessarily the first thing you want to do, because so when we work with people with collections, they're not all not all created equally and should be treated equally and addressed equally. They do fall off in 7 years. Taking that into consideration, and other things, we generally have a couple of rules of thumb, but a counselor would talk to someone more specifically about this. The thing we say is, what you want to do is not engage in a payment plan unless you absolutely have to, but to try to save up 50% of what you owe. And when you have that, to contact the creditor and offer to give it to them if they'll settle it for zero. Now, we also say really, and typically they will settle for 50% of the value. That was a little different during COVID, but we're seeing it again now. 3 things here. When you call and you ask them to settle, you definitely, before you get off the phone, want to say, will you take it off my report too? Now, if you haven't paid yet, they typically will say yes. The next thing you might want to say to them, though, is, or that you have to say to them is, can I get that in writing? We would suggest not giving them the money until you get it in writing, because they're incentivized to get your money after. If you don't get it in writing, it may not come off. Those are just some rules of thumb. Be very careful about payment plans, because if you exit a payment plan that you started on a collection, it actually restarts the clock for another 7 years. And actually, Kristen, I think I'm going to ask you to double check me on that one point, because I think you said it just opens the clock back up. So at the end, Kristen, if you could chime in on that. Now, the third rule is, why do you have to stay below 30% of your credit limit? And this is how we've helped so many people build strong credit. Let's just say you have $1,000 limit, right, on your credit card. So that means like you could today, tomorrow, borrow $1,000, but let's say you don't, right? Let's say you're able to leave at least 70% on the table. This actually has a huge effect on your credit score. Now, here's why. What does it say about you? That I handed you $1,000 and you left 700. You know, you didn't use 70% of it. What it says, and what we see the algorithm reflecting is, the person who doesn't use all that money probably is not in trouble. In other words, they don't need to use it right now. They don't have outstanding debts they need to address right away. And so leaving 30% or less actually pushes your score up. It's not a neutral thing. And so what we say to people when we work with them is, look at your credit card bills, and it's on every single, you have to kind of, if you can, keep your limits below 30%, pay the whole balance if you can. But keep it below 30% and you'll be pushing your score up. So what we're saying is, you know, look at your statements. If you see there's $1,000, multiply it by 0.3, it's $300. Try not to go over that amount if you can. What we see is, as soon as you go over 30%, even on just one of your cards, like you could have 10 cards, it'll lower your score by 40 to 50 points. Now, as soon as you bring them down below 30%, you'll recover. So it's not like you didn't do anything wrong. So it is a quick recovery. Now, having said that, we think credit cards are really important, and we don't ever want someone to say, oh, I can't use my credit card because I'm already at 30%. In an emergency, oh my gosh, don't worry about the 30%. I'm showing you here a person whose car breaks down. She needs $300 to get it towed. If she had the savings, she could pay $300 and get it fixed. And if she had a credit card, though, she could still get someone to, you know, come right away. She'd get to work or school. And even if the card was at 22%, it would cost, and she pays it back in 6 months, it would cost just $20 in interest. But in our city, this is in Chicago, they now have regulated payday loans. But if she went to payday lenders here, as you know, and before January of this, oh my gosh, I think it's almost a year and a half since we regulated it here. But before that, our payday lenders were at about 400%. She would have had to take 3 loans, each for $100 in our state of Illinois. And if she paid those back in 6 months, it would be $930. So please don't ever, you know, worry if you have to go above 30%. That's what they're for. We also kind of make the point when we work with someone that in an emergency, you really make sure you have a regular credit card. Like our joke is like, you know, Victoria's Secret's not coming to get you. If your car breaks down by the side of the road. They may, offer you underwear, but they're not coming to help you. You need a credit card that you could use anywhere in emergencies. And we work with people to make sure that they have that. Now, one more thing, because you work with people who are trying to get business credit, and Kristen's on the line to answer any questions you have about our work with small business owners. Because again, we're not SBOs. We help people get strong personal credit. But what we do know is that there is something we call the optimal credit profile. So what I mean by this is we can help people get a 730 credit score with just one credit card. But what we do find is that's not usually enough if someone is applying for a loan. And as you probably know, a lender, despite the person having a good score, may say, you know what, I'm really sorry, Ricky, I can't make that loan to you. I'd like to see at least 3 products that report monthly. They're looking for what's called a thick file. So they're saying, yes, I see you did well with this credit card, but I just need to see more before I can make a loan. So we, especially with our small business owners, we're trying to get it so they have at least 3 products that report monthly. The other thing is, if they have these, you sometimes can get turned down for a loan because they'll say, you have only credit cards and you're asking for a loan. We'd like to see that you have experience with a loan. Or let's just say you have only student loans, and while you're paying on them perfectly, now you're asking for a credit card and we've never seen, you have no experience with that. So often we're helping people who have good credit, they can't seem to move it up. They can't seem to get a loan. We're trying to make sure that they present the best case to the lender. Now, if anybody here, and I'll stop in a moment, if anybody here is interested in working with a counselor, that's available to you and to your clients. And this is what happened to the small business owners that these 206 that we've been working with here in Chicago. If the person wants this, the first step is actually a remote, so we use Zoom, a 60-minute counseling session. Now, again, they often will tell us all about their businesses, but, and we really want to know to understand what they're seeking in terms of business credit. But the way we help is to get their personal credit in shape so that because you really can't bypass personal credit on the path to business credit. That's where we come in and can be helpful. We'll start with a 60-minute meeting with them. We'll review their personal credit situation, their goals, their timing during that session. We'll prepare a budget that reflects where they are now. This is a personal budget. It could be for themselves or their household. And then with no penalty to them, because it's a soft pull, because we're a nonprofit, we pull their TransUnion credit report, and we pull 2 different FICO scores, 08 and 04, and we walk them through it. And we look at everything. And our counselors have been trained by Kristen, basically towards the end of that session, to develop a credit action plan that's soup to nuts. It can and will reflect the person's goals, but will reflect what our counselors know about the fastest path and the fastest path to a sustainable credit score. Now, part of that may be that they need to file a dispute. If that's the case, we can do it right then and there with them. No need to go to a credit repair company and get sucked into that. We can help them with that. Usually it happens right then and there. And if they need a product, we can recommend products because we don't have our own. If they also can leverage that product that we can get for anyone from Justine Peterson. Again, that costs us. We don't make money on that. Now, after that appointment, they can contact us, that same counselor, anytime for 12 months. The counselors are evaluated by how well their clients do, so they're always going to welcome those calls. But there are many people for whom, and I believe 56% of the business owners we serve asked for this. At the end of the call, we said to them, so are you scared that this plan is going to sit on a shelf with a million other plans and grow stale? And if you feel that way, would you like to meet with us regularly and use us to hold yourself accountable for getting it done? So again, 56% said yes to this, meaning they typically are meeting with their counselor every month. And many say that was the key. right? Just to kind of help organize what is often, a lot of things they have to do. Collections to address, student loans to inquire about, if things aren't reporting correctly. It can be, it can take a lot of support to address problems that are on the report. No matter what, at 6 and 12 months, if they've had that first meeting, we pull another report, we review it, we write up a very kind of layperson's summary of what's on the report, what's changed and why. And we send that report with the credit report and score to the person. And sometimes that's when they reach out. But we make that very simple. So if you know someone who needs that service, or you yourself are interested in that service, here is a link. And Kristen, if you can put it in the chat as well, you can get an appointment with one of our counselors anytime. This link takes you to the sign up page. You'll see you have to give a couple of permissions. We do need social security number because we need people's permissions. We need that to pull their scores. And again, you'll see this, if they check these 2 boxes, we get what we need to be able to pull the score. We also, it's an agreement that's embedded in here where we're saying that we'll keep their information absolutely confidential. As soon as they complete that, they're enrolled, and now they can set up their, on the right there, they can set up their first appointment. This is just a quick list of the kinds of issues we address. So there's nothing too big, too small. Big issues for us are student loan concerns. We have a ton of people coming to us. There's a lot of predatory actors in that space. The other big thing people come to us is high credit card debt. And where we really have expertise is helping people address that debt without kind of hurting their score or closing all of their cards. So I'm going to end this part of the presentation with the other big scam. I started with credit repair, but the other scam that's out there that you may have business owners affected by, it's called debt settlement or debt relief. So let me just explain this to you, and then we'll open it up to questions. So what do these companies promise? They promise to get rid of your credit card debt. But please know they charge a fee equal to 25% of your debt. The scam is in how they operate. What they'll do, let's just say I have $10,000 of credit card debt. They would actually say to me, Ricky, stop making credit card payments. Pay us instead. We'll put it in a fund, and when there's enough money there, we'll call and we'll settle on your behalf. So if I stop making credit card payments, you now know my score is going to go down very fast. It's going to get below 600 because those delinquencies lower your score by 100, 125 points. Why would they want my score to go down that far? It's because they actually want our the credit cards to go into collections, right? They want the credit card companies to close your account and put it in collections. Now, this should make sense. If I don't know if I've had enough coffee, but if I made sense. Why do they want it in collections? They know something that we just told you. Collection agencies will typically settle for 50% of the debt. Now, they'll do that with my 16-year-old son just as easily as they'll do it with a debt settlement company. So you end up with kind of a bad score, and you're they can negotiate your debt as you could have. What's more important, if they settled $10,000 of credit card debt for me, I would pay them $2,500 for having done that. Clearly, I can just let my stuff go into collections all on my own and call and settle. So that's the scam here. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ria and Kristen, and thank you all for listening, and welcome you all to ask any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ricky. Appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I know there have been a number of comments and responses in the chat. So are there any additional questions that anyone might want to ask?
And Ria, just in case at the end, we often have true or false, but I want to make sure people, just to check people's knowledge, but Kristen will be the one answering the questions. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I've got one that says from Marty, if they settle for a lower amount, will they 1099 the person or for the amount that is written off?
They can, yes, if they settle on a collection debt or a charge-off debt for less than the full balance, the creditor can send them a 1099 document in which they would then need to report that on their when they file taxes. What we tend to see is that what the amount that they are taxed on still is less than what they settle for. So it's still a good deal to settle, even if they get that 1099. But there are many times in which a creditor will not send a 1099. Usually it's on larger debts. I would say typically over $5,000, but it really just depends on the creditor.
Great. Another question is, can you help business owners that are not U.S. citizens but need business credit?
So again, we only work on personal credit, but we can help non-U.S. citizens get personal credit as long as they have an address in the United States. And they do not need to have a social security number in order to do that. There are ways to get credit building products to build personal credit without a social security number.
Great.
And
Another
Kristen,
one.
what I was told, Kristen, if I understand, if they become citizens at some point and they have a social security number, they kind of have to start again. Is that right? With personal credit?
It depends on the creditor, and some creditors will play nicer than others. So once they do get a social security number, you would then want the creditor to have that information. And then there is sometimes needing to link the two credit reports, so the one with social security number and the one without. The main driver of credit reports is name and address and date of birth. So if somebody moves around a lot, sometimes we get duplicate credit reports, and that's something we have to help migrate. So it's a process, but it can be done.
Okay. There is another question. Go up. Can that 1099 amount be negotiated down or out completely? This is from the previous one.
Absolutely. I think everything's negotiable with creditors. It just depends. So absolutely, those are all things that can be negotiated. You might end up paying more money and not get a 1099, less money and you get a 1099. Everything is negotiable.
And I know there was a question earlier about can you share the deck? I know the sessions are also being recorded, so I'm not sure if we are able to share the deck for this session.
We actually don't share the deck, and while we share the recording, Ria, we actually ask you not to share the recording. What I would say is anyone can call us and we can provide this kind of support to your nonprofit. But this is our proprietary kind of curriculum, and you're all small business owners, so I think you probably respect that. That being said, the contact us. We can provide this workshop. Again, we work with 8 different SBOs in the Chicago area where we provide this curriculum to their, it's usually added in if they have a cohort training model, or they'll make this available to their alumni or people they're working with now, they'll make referrals. So, but no, please don't share, we don't share this deck, but call us with any questions.
Got it.
Thanks, Ria.
Thank you. Is it a good idea to add your college student as a qualified user to your own credit card as a way to begin building their credit or establish a score for them?
Sure. I'll get to that in just a minute. I just see a couple of comments about the link and the deck. The link, the info.workingcredit.org, is a link to sign up for counseling. That's not a link to our deck. So just to clarify that. Okay, should you put your college student on as what we call an authorized user? So an authorized user is on credit cards only, not on loans. An authorized user has the ability to use the credit card, but they're not liable for the debt. Putting somebody on as an authorized user is a great strategy to helping people build credit. It's also something that we call piggybacking. There's pros and cons to it. The pro to it is if you've had a credit card for 20 years, you've always paid on time, and you keep that balance low, that person as an authorized user is going to get that 20 years history, and they could come out with an 800 credit score. I think it's a lot of times what we see individuals doing to help young adults build credit. The con is if it's a credit card that is not paid on time, or there's late payments, or it's maxed out all the time, that person is going to get that same history, right? So you would want it to be on a card that's paid on time and has a low utilization ratio. I will tell you, the other pro is that at any point, the authorized user can get that credit card off of their credit report at any time, because they're not liable for making payments on that debt. So they can actually get it removed from their credit report. They can either do a dispute with the bureaus or actually talk directly to the creditor and get themselves removed as an authorized user. But while it's on there, it can have positive effects or negative effects. I will tell you that FICO 8, which is the scoring model that most lenders are using right now, is trying to, they only will include the authorized user in the scoring model if they can tell that there's a familial, like a family relationship. And I'm not exactly sure how they do that. And I have seen issues in which, the husband is put on the wife's credit card, but the FICO 8 score is not seeing that and not putting that as part of the scoring model. So there are those kind of issues that might happen. So it's not a true proof way of building credit. I think it's definitely something you could do, but I would also then pull the credit report, pull the score either through Experian or My FICO, get the free version, see how it's impacting the score, and then helping that student go through their own credit building journey, like getting a credit building loan or a secured credit card or a student credit card, teaching them the proper use of those products.
Great. Let me go through here and check to see what we have. Do you remind borrowers of the difference in timing between payment data and reporting dates?
Absolutely. That really comes up a lot with credit cards. Any credit product, credit cards or loans only report once a month. And it's not necessarily associated with when your due date is. It's just one date that the creditor reports all of their credit history to the credit bureau. So it's not always associated. So like if your payment date's on the 15th and you pay it off in full, but on the 30th, that's when the creditor reports to the credit bureaus. And at that time, your credit card is maxed out. They're going to report that balance on the 30th, not on the 15th when you paid it off in full. So those are important dates, and those are something we definitely talk to our clients about. We actually, on our credit report, get the date that it was last reported to the credit bureaus. So we're able to kind of play that game and let our clients play that game, knowing when the creditor reports and when they should, really have their balance down low on those credit cards, so that they can maximize their score.
Kristen, there was one thing that you taught me. Every time I do this with Kristen, I learned something, which is we had people who literally would, and you may know people like this, they put something on their credit card and 5 minutes later they pay it back, right? Because they don't want to be in that space where it's going to hurt them. And there's nothing wrong with paying stuff off early, right, Kristen? But what we found is if you literally do it that day, it might not even get recorded. It's like the tree fell in the woods and nobody heard it. So here's this person with perfect payment. There's actually no record of there can be no record. So we always say, like, give it a night. It's just something we've seen.
Yeah, I would give like 24 or 48 hours before you pay it off. At that point, you won't be charged any interest. And so before you so you can get it kind of recorded and in the books, and then go ahead and pay it off.
Great. I'm just going through the chat to make sure I don't miss any questions?
I saw one that I think came directly to me, which is how do you get your credit reports for free? Annualcreditreport.com is the best place to get your free credit reports. Since COVID, since like sometime in 2020, annualcreditreport.com will allow you to pull your credit report weekly from the bureau. So it used to be you got one free credit report from each bureau once a year. You now get it weekly. So that's one great place. Again, in order to get your FICO score, I told you you could go to Experian or MyFICO and get your free score. FICO 8 scores don't pay for their credit monitoring, but they also give you reports. So you get your report from MyFICO with Equifax, and then on Experian, you get your free Experian report. And then Credit Karma is another good place. You get Equifax and TransUnion. That's a Vantage score, so not a FICO score. It is a Vantage score, but it's another good place to get your 2 bureaus. And then all 3 of those sites will provide you with credit monitoring, again, for free, where they'll tell you, like, if you have a new inquiries or a new account that hit your credit report or anything like that. So those are all great sites to kind of monitor your report for free.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions? There have been some great questions.
I have a question that was like, when is it, so based on kind of what I said, what is a good day to pay off your credit card? It's really hard. I mean, I think that if you keep your balance on your credit card under 30% and then ideally under 10% is actually better for your score. And you actually don't have to carry a balance on a credit card in order to build a score. You can, we just recommend using a credit card once every 6 months just to keep some activity on it so that the creditor doesn't close it. But there is no need to keep a balance on a credit card. But if you do carry a balance, obviously you want to pay on your due date, at least the minimum payment. But what I would suggest is to check your credit report either through like Credit Karma, Experian, or Annual Credit Report, and find out the date that the creditor reports it, and just make sure your balance is as low as possible on that, a couple days before they report. And typically, if they report, like if you see it on your credit report that they report on the 30th, they're usually most months going to report always on the 30th. It might be, a couple days before and a couple days after, but somewhere around that time frame. So, and then, your score is always going to fluctuate, especially if you have credit cards based on your balance. So, this month, if your balances are high on your credit cards, your score is going to be low. As soon as you pay them off, your score will go up. Obviously, once those balances get reported, right, it kind of fluctuates. So, monitoring your score through like MyFICO or Experian for free, you would be able to see kind of how your score ebbs and flows based on those changes in your credit card balances and other things going on with your credit report. But your score does change, fluctuate, 10 or 15 points every month, sometimes higher, sometimes lower.
A quick question on that. You talked about keep activity on your card so that they don't, the creditor doesn't close out your card. Will they notify you, or will they just automatically close it out?
Both.
Okay.
It actually happened to me. Like I had I think a Citibank card that I hadn't used in a long time, and I got a notification via email and mail that they were closing it, but like there was nothing I could do, so it was just closed. So they will notify you, but usually it's just by closing it out that they notify you. We've also seen, because of the economy, that creditors can lower your credit limit. So you do need to be careful about that. If you're not, utilizing all of your available credit, which is definitely a good thing for your score, they could reduce your credit limit on you. So that's just something to be aware of. What is your credit limit, and always keeping it below that utilization ratio.
Right. Here's another question. Is there anything we should be aware of regarding the different FICO algorithms for different types of loans, revolving versus auto versus mortgage?
Yeah, so it's we could spend all day talking about the different FICO scores. I will tell you that FICO 8 score is the main score that most creditors are using right now. I think it's the statistic is about 85 or 90% of lenders are using the FICO 8 model. Mortgages are using a very old model, created back in 1998. So it is a very old model and is very different from FICO 8, and it scores things differently. For instance, on a mortgage FICO score, you do want to keep a balance on your credit card, just a small balance, about 1 or 2%. That will maximize your score. So you actually lose points on the older model by having a balance. So just little nuances like that. But that said, with the FICO 8, like even if you, so there's like a FICO 8 general score, but then there's like a FICO 8 auto loan score, credit card score. There's a bunch of different models. So which just kind of put more weight on those specific products. So even if you pull your FICO 8 score, and then you go to an auto lender, they're going to pull a FICO 8 auto loan score, which is going to be different than your general score. So that's just important to know. You don't have one score, you don't have one FICO score, but usually if you're in the general area, it's going to be, and they do have different ranges. Some of those FICO scores actually go up to 1,000 versus 850. So there are different ranges. So lots of little nuances on that. I would say for the basics that Ricky went over, have a credit card and a loan, pay them on time, keep your balances low on your credit cards. Once you're doing that, pay off your collections and, that kind of thing. And your score will go up.
Excellent. Thank you.
And Ria, if you're interested, we often start here, but we didn't. But oh, go ahead, Ria.
No, go ahead. I'm fine.
I was going to say, just to make sure these are questions. We have some true or false that we usually start with when we're in person. But do you guys just check yourselves on this? Is it true or false that all negative information comes off your credit report in 7 to 10 years? We like to start with this, especially because many people feel like they've ruined their credit and then come to find out that everything, well, let me ask you, do you, Kurt, I'll ask you, since you're my victim and I know you've been through this. Is that true or false that all negative information comes off your credit score in 7 to 10 years?
False.
Right. So that's exactly right. But why is that false? And I'll tell you, everything comes off your credit report in 7 to 10 years, with the exception of one thing, and that's federal student loans. So it is true, everything negative falls off in 7 to 10 years, with the exception of federal student loans, which will stay there for until you pay them back. So these are kind of trick questions. Our staff hates them, but I like them to just kind of confirm that when we say you can't ruin your credit score, again, with federal student loans, you can, they can be a problem, but everything else falls off. Oh, go ahead, Ria.
Yeah, just a quick question in regards to student loans. Is there any reason to pay student loans ahead of time with them now being in a holding pattern until August?
Oh, Kristen, go ahead and take that one.
So the only positive obviously there's 0% interest right now. So if you are looking to pay down your student loans faster, I would recommend going ahead and taking advantage of that. I'm not sure what will come as of August, or if they will get, if the payment hold will be extended even more, if they will continue to be at 0%. I mean, everything is on the table at this point, even forgiveness. So I don't think all will be forgiven, but we are watching that closely. But I would say that if you are somebody who has the ability to kind of make payments on your student loans, that 0% interest is very positive right now.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Ricky.
Okay, so, and I won't if someone could answer this, true or false, one inquiry, like when you request credit, lowers your score by 40 to 50 points. Is that true or false? Kristen's not allowed to answer. And I
How
can
about
tell you.
true?
What'd you say, true? So this is why we put these out here. These are the things that we want to make sure people know. One, you can't ruin your credit. Everything comes off except for student loans. And inquiry, we've seen people get very concerned that this is going to really devastate their score if they look for credit. It's not 40, it will lower your score, but by like 3 to 10 points. And that will kind of fade away within 2 or 3 months. So, you know, we have a credit system, for better or for worse, that requires us to have products. So we just want to dispel this notion that it really hurts that much. Now, one thing Kristen also has taught me is that if you're about to, Kristen, I hope I get this right. If you're about to buy a car, and you might have like 10 different car loan companies, you know, 10, you're shopping around and 10 different creditors have pulled your score. You don't have to worry that they're each going to cost you 3 to 10 points. But Kristen, it'll just count one time as long as it's within, is it 2 weeks or 30 days?
So 30 days, you can shop around for credit cards and for mortgages individually, not the same at the same time. But if you go to a car lender, and a lot of times what they do is they actually shop around for you. So they have a bunch of auto lenders pull your credit report and then give you the best deal. And so you'll see a bunch of inquiries on your report, but because you're shopping around, the score knows that it's all for the same thing and you're just shopping around. So it'll only impact you that one time within 30 days. You want to make sure you don't have any other inquiries in between that time period, like applying for a credit card or applying for a mortgage. That starts that period all over again. But the same is true for mortgages. You can shop around for 30 days. So go to, a number of different mortgage lenders and have them all pull your credit report, and it will not impact your score. It will only impact it that one time.
Right. So this is us kind of trying to address some myths that are out there. But Kristen, with a credit card, every time you go, it's 3 to 10 points, right? If you're looking for a credit card.
Yes.
It's just
So if
mortgages
you
and
go to
car loans.
Correct.
Right. Business loans, Kristen, there's no such thing, right? No 30-day.
That's a great question. I would have to look at that. I can get back, or feel free, I can look into it if business loans, if that's a permissible purpose for that.
Okay. And the next one is, and again, this is where there's a lot of people get this wrong. I did a million times, or I did when I first started working on this, and Kristen's really helped me with this. Is it true or false that you have to keep a balance on your credit card to build a strong score? And by that, I mean, over 780. Do you have to have a balance? Anyone? Okay, so that's completely, utterly, 100% false. And I think that it's a fiction created by the credit card companies, and there's a tiny little bit of a nugget of truth that allows this myth to stay out there. If you pay your credit card balances off every month, you will have a great credit score. Now, you won't have an 850 for some crazy reason, which someday we'd love to address. If you really want a perfect credit score, you should have like a 1, 2, or 3% balance. But what we try to emphasize is that the difference in your life out in the marketplace with an 820 versus an 850 is negligible. There's nothing there. I think what's upsetting is that credit card companies, or that the algorithm, I can't imagine, and Kristen, maybe you can tell me why they do this, but because it is true that you can't get to an 850 without carrying a very low balance, it allows, we find like, it allows, bank tellers and others, or personal, like, people advising on credit to say, oh, you better keep a balance to have a strong score. No, you can, if you want a perfect score, yes. So the answer to that is false.
You had a couple more questions when you get a chance.
Sure. The last one, or let's go to I'll just do the last one here. It says, if you pay all your bills on time, you'll have a strong credit score. Is that true or false? And the answer to that is actually false as well. Why is that? We meet people who pay all their bills on time, but they don't have any credit cards and they don't have any loans. And so they actually have no credit score. As I said, especially in communities of color, we meet people who, because there's been so much discrimination, there's a really lack of trust in credit products. And so we have people not using them. But then you can make this assumption that if you pay all your bills on time, you have a strong score. If you don't have a loan or at least one loan or credit card, you'll have no score, which again is you'll be treated like you have a subprime score. And so you're probably going to meet people who want to start, you probably meet people now who just don't have scores. Certainly don't write them off. They're probably very good money managers. And then what we've learned over time is, especially for people of color, the introduction to credit might be, oh, there's something on there, but it's a collection. Just having a collection on your report doesn't generate a score. Like, you have a report, there's negative information there, but there's no score. So when we meet someone who just has collections but no score, the first thing we're going to recommend is they get a product, because it's still going to be 6 months before they get a score, and no one's going to give them business credit until they start showing a strong score. So anyway, Ria, let me turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ricky. Questions. What about rental housing inquiries looking at several different landlords?
Yeah, so landlords, it really depends on the landlord. Some actually pull soft pull. So no, it's not an inquiry on your credit report. It would be, you would see it on a consumer report. So like if you pull it through annualcreditreport.com, any of the bureaus, that kind of thing, that's a consumer report. You see all of your soft inquiries on those reports. But landlords, sometimes they pull soft inquiries, sometimes they pull hard inquiries. The hard inquiries would show up on your credit report that lenders can see. So it really just depends who they're using to pull reports. And that's the same with insurance companies too as well. Some of them pull soft inquiries, some of them pull hard inquiries. So those are important. I tend to see most insurance companies pulling soft inquiries. And then a lot of times, a lot of these companies are only pulling one bureau, not all three. So the only time I really see pulling all three bureaus are on larger loans like mortgages and then large business loans. I would see what we call a tri-merge report, which is all three bureaus. Getting back to the question, landlords, again, depending if they pull soft or hard, and then there is not a shopping around period for that.
Okay, thank you. So another one is, so can other creditors see how many times those multiple inquiries were made?
Yes. Yep. So if you go to an auto lender and they pull your credit report 20 times, they're going to see all 20 inquiries. It should not, it shouldn't affect the decision that the lender is making. So if you have 20 inquiries versus one inquiry, and it's only going to affect your score that one time. So it really shouldn't affect your ability to borrow. I think the only thing the lender would want to make sure, if there's a 2-week time period, is that you didn't take out that loan or take out that credit card with that creditor and got yourself into debt and then asking for another loan and getting yourself into more debt. So they just want to make sure that you're not getting two loans. But usually it shouldn't affect the decision.
Great. I've seen a situation where a company was applying for a loan and a negative comment or was taken off one credit report, but not off the others. And also I was going to ask, if they're only pulling one credit report, which one do they typically pull most often, have you seen, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It really just depends on who the creditor has a relationship with. We used to see it segmented by area of the country, but that's really not the case since the 3 bureaus are now really national bureaus. So it just really depends on the creditor. And yes, that can happen when things happen on your credit report and it's updated on 1 or 2 of the bureaus and not the 3rd one. The best thing to go is directly to the creditor and get that taken care of. Unless that comment is coming from the bureau, then you have to deal with that with the bureau directly.
Very good. Can you also, before, I mean, we still have about 10 more minutes or less than 10 more minutes, but can you put the screen up? I think, Ricky, that had your contact information. So if people want to reach out, I know Kristen put it in the chat.
Oh, yes. And, you know, Kristen, I don't think I actually have our, and again, for everybody
I
who's,
just put our
Okay.
email addresses in the chat box.
Great. Thank you.
So you have that. And then I have had a couple people reach out to us directly about providing workshops to your participants or something like that. So that is something we would definitely be interested in. So feel free to contact me or Ricky or both of us, and we can get you to the right people to get that going.
Great.
please let me
Very good.
apologize again that I did pour a seltzer on my computer. So it just isn't as easy to work with today. So please forgive me. But yeah, we wanted to welcome you to reach out to us if you think we can be helpful to the entrepreneurs you work with. That usually is the case where you can just refer people individually and we can set them up with a workshop or with an appointment, or you can add our workshop. You can offer our workshop to your alumni or into a program that you run.
No, thank you so much. This has been very helpful. I know quite a few of us deal with business owners that are doing startups. And that's really important to make sure that their personal credit is where it needs to be, because they've got to start somewhere when they're trying to build that business credit with the bank. And that's the only thing that the bank has to see is their personal credit. So I think this will be very helpful for, a lot of the people that we encounter. So this has been excellent.
And I would say we also love working with small business owners because they are so very focused and motivated. And so they take every bit of crazy advice we give and they use it and they run with it. And so I think having that goal just makes it so that, it's like it's a good match. It's a really good match.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, for everybody's participation. This has been excellent. And thank you for your contact information. I'm sure you will be overloaded with emails. And I wish your computer a speedy recovery.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.